Hello and welcome to the Reviews Brothers, where yes, we are going through the entire alphabet and choosing 10 games for each letter for games that you don't hear about as much as you probably should. And right here I have 10 games starting with the letter M that fit that bill just nicely. Oh, and just preempting you, there's no Mr. Mosquito here, for two reasons really. Firstly, I think most people know about it by now, and secondly, I already have another video on the pipeline where I plan on including it, so don't worry, you will get to see the creepy bug soon enough. Anyway, how about I shut up, you press that subscribe button, and we take a look at some games. Oh, and don't forget to check out my Patreon for even more content, including games that are just too hot for YouTube. Let's start out strong with MDK 2 Armageddon. The original MDK is probably a game that would feature in my top 10 games of all time. It's one of those ones that I played just at the right time, and thankfully the follow-up is also a great game. The story follows on from the first, and after you've killed an alien leader, his army is in disarray, but wouldn't you know it, another evil git has taken up the mantle and is out to get revenge on Earth for killing their big bad. Thankfully, there's 3 heroes who can set out to stop all this nonsense. That's right, unlike the first game, here you can play as 3 characters. You've got Kurt Hectic, a janitor turned hero with the aid of a supersuit, Max, a 4-armed, 2-legged cyberdog who is a great mechanic and also obsessed with guns, and then you've got Professor Hawkins, a genius professor who created all the tech that's being used to save the planet. The game is a third-person action game, and depending on the character, you've got slightly different play styles. Kurt has his supersuit, which gives him a chain gun with unlimited ammo, and a really cool parachute that ignores physics but lets you glide safely along large gaps. Kurt's levels are packed with action, as well as a lot of platforming that use his skills. You'll have to fight loads of alien scum throughout the levels, and your chain gun makes light work of most of them, with a good and needed auto-aim. Another of Kurt's abilities is the use of his sniper mode. You can enter sniper mode, and this gives you access to a handful of ammo types, from regular shots as well as grenades, homing shots and mortars. You'll find puzzles in the levels that require certain ammo, like a building with a hole in the roof that you'll need to fire a mortar through to blow up the whole thing. Kurt also uses his cool parachute a lot, with plenty of large bottomless pits for you to get over, and one wrong move can cost your life. There's fans all over the place as well that you can use to glide in the air before falling with style to a safe spot. Max the dog's levels are basically pure action. You collect loads of weapons like magnums, shotguns, Uzis, and having 4 arms, you can equip any combination of weapons that you've collected. This is really good fun, though I did find that I really couldn't care what weapon I equipped, as long as I had 4. You have the pistol that doesn't run out of ammo, but any of the other ones you collect will run out eventually, so you will be swapping quite often. Max also finds a jetpack pretty early on, and this is used a lot in the levels. It uses fuel which can be replenished at certain spots, so you need to be careful and plan your routes to the various obstacles and mazes that it's used for. And then there's Professor Hawkins. He has a very different playstyle. His levels are more puzzle focused, though they still have plenty of enemies, it's just that you need to find a way to kill them using your head, more than just shooting them. Being a professor, you can invent loads of things, and you'll collect a bunch of random stuff while you're exploring the levels. You can equip items in your left and right hands, and by equipping and combining the right things, you'll make various contraptions that can help you, like a ladder that can get to high areas, a leaf blower to blow enemies into hazards and kill them, and most importantly, an atomic toaster that fires radioactive bread which can be used to kill enemies. You'll also need to use items in other ways, like patching and repairing things with duct tape, so items you find might not be used to make anything, and they might just be used somewhere in the level. It can make for some pretty tricky puzzling. No matter who you play as though, it's always really good fun, and the game has a wacky sense of humour that I absolutely love. The enemies are all various types of alien or robot, and you get a load of bosses to take down. These fights are always great and often have a puzzle element to them as well. I like the graphics here. It is an early game for the system, actually being a PC and Dreamcast game first. You can kind of see that, but the level design and overall art style really make it stand out and look good. The main issues for most people, and when I say most people I mean me, are the level design themselves, which can be quite confusing. They are kind of linear but still hard to navigate thanks to all the corridors and things looking the same, and there's rarely any direction as to where you need to go. And the other thing are the controls. There's a ton of preset options you can choose from, and while there should be something for everyone, it's easy to see that this is an early game as none of them are really perfect, more that you'll just find one that you can work with, and you can't customize it yourself. But still, these gripes do not hold the game back from being a great one. MDK only got 2 games in this series, but I'd say they are both must-plays, and it's a series that I'd love to see get resurrected. Believe it or not, we have a couple of RPGs in this episode. This one is Magic Pen Gel, a game I'd never heard of, and nor had you. This is a strange, quirky game where you play as a pen gel, a creepy being thing that has a magic brush for an arse. You live in a world where people have their own pen gels, and what you can do is draw creatures with magic ink. These creatures then come to life, so you can battle them. So yeah, it's kind of Pokemon, but you draw the monsters yourself. Turns out the king of the land here is a bastard and corrupt and is forcing his creations, and other ones that people are making, to do awful work for him. And when you find this out, you go on a quest to make your pen gel drawing strong enough so that you can battle him and stop this tyranny, even though it's basically the same as what you're doing. Ah well. So you start out by drawing a creature. At first you can't be too creative as you don't have much ink. You can draw a body and an extremity, like a horn. Depending on what you draw, you're assigned stats, which are HP, magic, attack, and speed. These do the usual RPG things. You also get assigned random attacks, and as far as I know, there's not much you can do about this as it's all based on the designs that you draw. The game is set in just one kingdom, and you have to explore all around it, meeting various people, and you'll need to talk to everyone you can to find out bits of the story, and also to challenge them to a battle. Battles take place in a few arenas around the kingdom, and fighting people will do a few things. Most importantly, it will level up your creations, as long as you win, which is harder to do than you'd think. If you win or lose though, you will get coloured ink. This is the magic ink that you need to draw your creations. Winning a fight will get you considerably more ink than if you lose, but that makes sense. You can also then use this ink to either draw a new creation or edit one of your existing ones. And you can also unlock new parts to draw, and you can end up with eyes, arms, legs, and so on, whereas you can only draw a body at the start. It's really cool drawing your creations and seeing them come to life in 3D in the game, and the fact that you make them yourself actually makes you care about them. If you want to, you can take your magic ink to Grandma, who runs a little shop. She'll exchange it for money. You can then go spend this in the various shops around the kingdom, as well as being able to buy pre-made creatures to battle. None of the pre-made ones seemed particularly great that I found, but you can still level them up and use them as starting points to make some gruesome additions to them. The battles themselves are turn-based, and you have a few options of what to do. You can attack, use magic, defend, or recover. Most of these are exactly what you'd expect, but if you recover, you always go first on that turn and you'll recover some HP, as well as boosting your attack power for the next turn. The thing here though is that you can't use the same action twice in a row, so if you use magic one turn, then you're forced to use something else on the next. This actually comes into play quite a lot, and it's one of those rock paper scissors scenarios. Attacks are good against blocks, as you can only block magic. Magic is great if the other person has used an attack, and so on. So you want to keep an eye on what your opponent has done the turn before and try to counter what they might do next. It's kind of simple but effective. And while the battles start off quite tough, at least it did for me, you will still earn ink to upgrade your characters and can keep coming back until you're strong enough to kick their butt. The graphics here are actually excellent, with a really cool cartoony style, and I like how all the crazy creations look in 3D. There's plenty of cutscenes here which you can't actually skip, and I did find that sometimes they seem to go on longer than a Sega Lord X video's intro. But to be fair, there's quite a lot to take in here, so it's good to get these full instructions. There's also loads of voices, and the characters are all fun to talk to. I especially like the guy with the guitar who sings everything he says. I'm actually surprised that this game didn't get a sequel on the Wii or something, as it's a really cool premise and it's harder than you think to get into, but it's one that somehow keeps you coming back for more. At least it did for me. Here is Melty Blood, Actress Again, a 2D fighter with a stupid name that as far as I can see was only released in Japan and was a spin-off from a visual novel series. There is a story, but it's a fighting game, so no one cares. I say that, I don't. But actually, it's based on a visual novel, so it should be more interesting. And from what I can see, a bunch of murders have taken place, and the characters here all have something to do with the murders or the investigation, so need to have a punch-up. You get a decent selection of around 30 characters to choose from, each with their own attacks and specials as you'd expect, and the game uses the classic Street Fighter control scheme, so I felt right at home here. So you choose your character and then you have your fights. You've got the usual set of attacks, and blocking is done by holding back on the controller. And when you've kicked enough ass, you can unleash some of your super moves for massive damage. first to win 2 out of 3 rounds wins. You have 3 attack buttons, a weak, medium and strong attack, so special moves can be done using any of these buttons, but the move will be slightly different depending on the one that you press, either in distance, size, range or something like that, depending on the attack. To do your super specials, you'll always need to press the hard attack button. The other button on the controller is your parry. Press it at just the right time and you'll block an opponent's attack and leave them open for a counter, and even adds a fair chunk to your special meter. It's actually pretty forgiving as well, and surprisingly easy to use, though you won't want to rely on it all the time. Characters do have their own backgrounds and stages, but there's never really much of interest going on in them, and it's mostly just stills, which is a bit of a shame. A bit of interactivity would have been nice. The graphics are great though, as is usually the case with 2D sprite-based fighting games. The characters all look excellent and have good, smooth animation. Learning the combos and putting them together is really satisfying and always looks great. You've also got a few game modes here. Along with the usual arcade mode, which plays through your story, you also have training and survival modes, where you see how many people you can beat up in just one life bar. These modes are nothing special, but it's nice to have some variety. And of course, if you've got a friend, this is a good one to play with them, and you can easily see a few hours away kicking the shit out of each other with these anime weebs. And yeah, that's about it really. It is a fairly standard fighting game, but it's well made and a good amount of fun. Definitely one that I would recommend. Next up is Malice, an interesting 3D adventure game where you play as a goddess called Malice. The evil dog god has turned up and is causing a load of trouble, hence your return. So you've got to explore various worlds where you'll battle all sorts of enemies to collect logic keys that are then put into a giant mechanical thingy that will then open a door to let you fight the naughty boy. You start the game in a hub world where you chat with a giant clock thing who's basically your mate. He tells you where you need to go and what you need to do, though this is never exactly hard to figure out and the game is very linear, but still, he seems like a nice chap. Gameplay is simple enough. You're sent into a level and your only mission is to find the logic key, though it's never that simple. You'll end up needing to do a load of other side missions in order to get the power-ups, items and things you need to find it. As you'd expect, this involves a lot of platforming, puzzle solving, double jumping and whacking enemies with your massive club. As you explore the environments, which for the most part are your usual forests, caves, tech, fire, ice, etc. levels, you'll meet a few characters that will help you out. Usually after you've done something for them first, of course. These things involve more platforming and collecting things, but once you've done that, you'll go back to them and they'll open a door for you, let you access something you couldn't before, or sometimes even give you a magic power. You get a few powers, like being able to glide for a short while, powering up your club to make it stronger, or making you run faster. You'll need to use these at various points throughout the game to get where you need to go, and the controls here are pretty good and easy to get used to, so it's never a problem. There are puzzles in the levels as well. These will be switch puzzles where you'll need to push things in certain orders or within a time limit, and then you even have parts where you need to guide little robot guys to power pads to different parts of the levels. Honestly, the game does a pretty decent job of mixing things up. You even get boss fights at the end of each world, and I actually quite like seeing these and the other wacky characters in the game. There is just something that really appeals to me when you get these games set in slightly bizarre worlds that you could see being made into a Tim Burton film. As mentioned, Malice has a massive club that is her main weapon. This works well, and you have 2 attack buttons. One is your normal swing that kills most things easy enough, and then you've got a more powerful overhead swing that takes a lot longer to pull off but does more damage. This is also needed against some of these smaller enemies that you can't reach with your normal attack. Most of the bad guys you fight are crows, and they come in a few varieties. Some just try to peck you, some have guns, and so on. I guess Malice's hair is just too orangey for crows. This isn't a very long game and you can beat it in about 4 hours. It'll take longer if you want to explore every area to find the hearts which increase your overall life, but honestly they're not really needed. Graphically, I think the game looks really good. It was actually an early game for the system, but I really like the style of it all. As I said, it's that kind of dark cartoon that's really appealing to me. It was actually meant to be a PS1 game, but was held back and released for the PS2 and Xbox. Isn't that fun? I had a quick look at some review scores and actually saw that it got quite crappy reviews, which I have to say I'm a little surprised at, as I had a really good time playing this game. For some reason it does struggle to run on the PCSX2 on my Steam Deck, and I had to put the game on the lowest possible settings, or there was just constant terrible frame rate. Not sure what that was all about, but it doesn't matter as it was still fun to play and looked good. And actually it's pretty cheap if you do want to buy a real copy, and I have to say it probably is worth the money, and I am going to look for a copy for my Xbox. Next up is Mark Echo's Getting Up, and I'm telling you, it doesn't get more 2000s edgy than this game, and I'm probably not the best person to be talking about it if you're meant to take it seriously. First off, I have no idea who this Mark Echo knobber is, and I don't care enough to Google it, but that shouldn't matter if the game is any good, and actually, it really is. The story here is that you're a punk criminal graffiti guy, and you need to go around the place tagging local architecture with your cool tag so people know you're cool. Of course, there's loads of other gangs in the city as well, and they'll be doing the same tagging. So you want to put your tags over their tags so they know your tags are cooler than their tags. In this version of the world, there's also a crazy militant police force who are out to put a stop to any naughtiness, and if you are indeed very naughty, and you'll want to stay away from them as much as possible. Often you'll come across a bunch of other gang members and you'll need to fight them. Thankfully, you're actually quite tough and have a few combos you can throw together against anyone that wants to question your edginess. You've got a punch and a kick button, and doing combos of these does a few different chains of attack. Holding the attack buttons down let you do a powerful attack that can break an enemy's block, and you can also grab bad guys and throw them into other people or scenery for massive damage. Of course, as you're super cool and tough, you can also do insult moves, where you literally bitch slap an enemy and give them an insult as your finishing move. Now these are meant to be cool, but honestly they're just hilarious for trying so hard to be edgy. They're so needlessly tricky to pull off as well, so I never really bothered anyway. The main focus though is on graffiti, and you'll be doing a lot of tagging all over the place. You have main objectives where you need to tag something, and these things are always highlighted for you. You can also have smaller areas where you can tag things, so when you see a wall, make sure you scan it using your graffiti intuition, so you can see anywhere that you can spray. Most walls can have more than one tag on them, and as you play, you'll unlock more colours and designs to do. Walls can also have loads on them, so you get more rep for the more tags that you do. Smaller tags are done automatically, and yeah, I'm so sorry I've said tag so many times. But if you're cool, you can even sneak up on cop cars and start drawing all over them. For bigger doodles, you'll need to use the analog stick to control your arms and tag it as neatly as you can. You get a better rating for how in the lines you are and how quickly you can do it, just like in primary school. These bits though are actually really good fun. Getting around the town is done with a bit of platforming. You can run, jump and climb all over the place, and while you're not quite the Prince of Persia, you will be doing a fair bit of parkour to get around. The graphics here are very PS2, if you know what I mean, but they are decent and I don't really have any complaints. The controls are also really good, and it's easy to fight, platform and spray things. My only real complaint, which isn't something exclusive to this game but applies to a lot of TV, film and other video games, is that it just seems to be trying so hard to be cool and edgy that it just comes off as laughable. All the characters talk like wannabe gangsters, and it's all about being cool criminals, swearing and calling people a bitch, and then smashing their head in with a baseball bat. If you're a 12-year-old in the 2000s, you'll probably think this is really cool, but anyone older than that is likely just to find it funny like I do. But if you can get past the edge without cutting yourself on it, then actually you will find that this is a surprisingly fun game to play. It's very well made, it has a decent soundtrack, and I genuinely did enjoy playing it. Mark of Kri here is a cool third-person action game where you play as Rao Utu, a cool warrior chap who is a protector of the Marks of Kri, and I'll be honest, I'm still not sure what the Marks of Kri really are, but I'm sure they're very important. As you'd expect, all sorts of nasty bastards start showing up near your village, and they're stealing and destroying all sorts of stuff, so the best thing to do is to nip out and murder the lot of them, which I have to say is really fun to do. The levels here are all quite large, but also linear, which isn't a bad thing, and you set out with your sword and bird companion to get rid of various bandits and ne'er-do-wells. This game plays differently than most though, and can take a minute or two to get used to, but it's got a cool system. As you're playing, you control Rao with the left stick. He can run, jump and climb to his heart's content. And when you see enemies though, what you need to do is use the right analog stick to point a cursor over them to highlight them. If there's more than one enemy, you'll want to highlight them all. They are then assigned a button above their heads. Then basically you just need to press the button assigned to that specific enemy to attack that enemy. It works pretty well, so if the one assigned with the circle buttons tries to sneak up behind you while you're pressing the X button, just start pressing the circle button and you'll automatically start attacking the enemy with the circle above its head. It's really cool. There's also combos and things you can find and unlock as well, and the combat is surprisingly in depth. You can also use stealth here, and I actually found this really fun to do. By putting your weapons away, you can go into sneak mode. Here you can move silently and get behind enemies. Then you're given button prompts which allow you to do takedowns on them and not alert other enemies. These takedowns are actually surprisingly violent, which I didn't expect, but I like it. On top of that, you've got a bird mate who can help you see what's coming up next. There's highlighted areas in the levels where you can tell him to fly to, and then you get to see from his point of view, letting you see any traps, enemies or obstacles that are coming up. You might even need to use the bird to pull switches or activate things that are out of reach of your muscular grasp, and it is worth using the bird as often as you can, as if you're surrounded by enemies it doesn't take long for them to slice you to bits, so it's useful to know where they are. What's cool is that each level has its own mini challenges as well that you can complete if you're good enough. These include things like killing a certain amount of enemies in stealth mode, collecting items, not alerting enemies to your presence, and stuff like that. You don't have to do any of these, but you get rewards that might help you out later in the game if you do. The graphics here are good. It is an early game, but it all looks smooth and reminds me of old animated movies. I kinda like it, though it's not going to win any awards. The only real complaint I have is that you can't control the camera at all, thanks to the way the gameplay works. And there were times where I couldn't see an enemy, item or something that I needed that was literally right next to me because I couldn't look around to see it freely. There is a look mode that you can select, but it slows the pace of the game, and having to stop and start all the time meant I rarely bothered using it. Still, this game is damn fun, and it's even got a sequel which I will have to try at some point. Definitely one that you should try out if you haven't already. Survival horror time now with Michigan: Report from Hell. I love survival horror games, and it's great when you see something new in them, and this game is really a unique take. You play as a cameraman as part of a news crew, and your crew have been sent to report on a mysterious fog that's appeared in the city, and to see what the hell is going on. It doesn't take long before strange shit starts happening and you realise that you need to get out of Dodge. But being good reporters that you are, you never stop filming, so even if you and your crew die, there's evidence of what's going on. So yeah, early on, monsters start coming out of the fog and eating people. These people then turn into monsters themselves. It's all very nasty. The way it works here though is that as the cameraman, you can't really do too much. Instead, you need to make sure you capture the nasty shit that's happening all around you while your crew does most of the hard work. Now, that's not to say that you're useless, and in fact, you still have a very important role to play. As you have the camera, you'll need to scour the environment to find clues or items that your crew can then pick up and use elsewhere. You'll also find notes, newspapers and other things that have been written down in order to give you clues as to what's going on and what you might need to do next. You can also highlight certain objects, which tells your crew that they might need to interact with them. And when you go to a new area, it's your job to stick your camera through the doorway to make sure the coast is clear before giving your crew the okay to enter the room. If you're not careful, you can make them enter a room that has a hidden enemy just out of sight and they might get eaten. You can also do things to help out, like when one of your crew is reporting to the camera, they might be walking backwards, or facing you and not looking around. Enemies or obstacles might be near them, and it's your job to tell them when they're in danger. Also, it's your job to point out where enemies are so your crew can shoot them and kill them. And finally, you do have a shove button that lets you push your friends and crew members out of the way of danger. Enemies could pop out of anywhere, and sometimes the only way to stop them being killed is to push your friends out of the way. It's very cool and very unique. The thing is, there's actually times where you do want them to be in danger, as you're ranked on how exciting the footage you record is. So there's actually times where you want your colleagues to nearly die, but save them at the last minute. Or maybe you actually do want them to be eaten. Or maybe not so severe, is that you might just want them to trip over or something like that, and so you get more points. Alternatively, you can try to get erotic points by filming sexy things, because this game was made in Japan. I actually didn't come across anything that got me sexy points in the 2.5 hours that I've played of it, but as it's a Japanese game, I'm assuming there's parts where women show off their underwear. And by the way, if you do want the sexy stuff, make sure you check out the reviews that are only available on my Patreon. Just saying. The graphics here are decent enough, but it does give low-budget game vibes. However, I'd say that it actually works in its favour and really has a B-movie charm to it, with strange characters and gross monsters. This is definitely a game I will be going back to, as it's just so unique and genuinely interesting to play. Sadly, this one is a rare game, so if you do want a physical copy, expect to pay a month's rent for it, so you might want to fire up the emulator for this one. Next up is Musashi: Samurai Legend. This is a cool 3D action RPG adventure that's the sequel to the PS1 game, which is also really fun. You are Musashi, a samurai bloke who is going around doing good samurai stuff and doing some training with his cat master, when all of a sudden a princess is captured, along with the residents of a mystical tower thing that's also a flying dragon. You know, the usual. So, being a cool samurai, you start to help out, defeating a load of monsters and hunting down the people that are trapped in magic blue orbs throughout the levels. Between levels you go back to a hub world, where anyone that you've rescued will then have set up a shop, a home, or something along those lines, and they'll help you out by selling you things, teaching you new attacks or magical powers, or letting you know what levels still have people that need rescuing in them. And then you go to the action levels, where your main objectives are to kill all the enemies you see, which actually isn't possible as they all respawn, and of course rescue everyone you can. As you'd expect, you'll need to do lots of exploring to do this, and you'll need to go back to levels at later points with new abilities to find new people. Fighting enemies is fun. You've got a few weapons that you can get along the way, but your swords are always the main focus. You've got basic combos you can do, but one main mechanic here, which is very unique actually, is that you can lock onto enemies, which builds up a focus bar. If you get this bar full and let the enemy attack you, you can then counter it and actually learn that attack to use yourself. These attacks become regular ones in your normal arsenal and will require specific button inputs to pull off, and it's really fun to learn these and to do them as part of your normal combos. You can level up here, and when you do, you've got the option to do the usual health, attack, speed or focus. Leveling up your focus makes it quicker to get this bar maxed out, which is handy as the harder an enemy is, the longer it takes to fill, and you can't block, attack or be too far away from an enemy while it's doing it. Do any of these things and it will just reset, and can actually be very hard to learn some of the new moves. There's a few other gameplay styles in here as well to mix things up, like having to complete escort missions quite regularly, as well as vehicle sections. These aren't terribly often, but are always a welcome break. As the eagle-eyed ones of you may have spotted, the graphics here are brilliant, with an amazing cel-shaded style and some great animation. I really love how it all looks, and even though I'm not entirely sure I like the Musashi design here, you've got to admit that it looks fantastic while you're playing. There's loads of different enemies to fight as well, and some huge boss battles as well. I do like that this game is more level based than an open roaming RPG, as it makes progression happen at a steady pace, and you never really find yourself wandering around with no idea what to do next. I didn't know this game even existed until I was looking for games for this video, and while it's definitely not perfect, it does have some control lag issues and definitely some camera problems. It's still a really solid game, and I'm surprised it doesn't get more love. Time for a shooter now, with a stupid name that I will probably butcher. Deal with it. This is Mushi Himi-sama, and it's a bullet hell shooter from Cave, the experts at making bullet hell shooters, I think. This one doesn't waste any time with story nonsense, and after choosing if you want to play classic or arranged mode, you're immediately thrown into the action. Though there is actually a story if you look it up, where bug-like creatures live outside a little fairy village thing, and people in the village start to get sick. So you've got to go out and find a cure while fending off the waves of bugs that want to eat you. At least I think that's what the story is. It's hard to tell. But much like the fighting games, the story in shooters doesn't really matter to me, and I just want to get to the shooty bang bangs. You can play this game single or co-op with a friend, but as you know, I don't have any of those. You can't choose a character, but you can choose a weapon set that suits you. One shoots straight forward, another's more of an angle, and the other one shoots at even more of an angle. They're all decent, but I tended to stick with the one that's basically a spread shot. Then you set out into some levels that auto-scroll straight forward while waves and waves of bugs come at you. Some of which just fly around and get in the way, while others shoot streams of bullets on you that you'll need to dodge. Killing enemies makes them drop power-ups or points. Power-ups make you fire even more projectiles, and if you die you'll power down, but usually you've got the chance to grab a few more immediately, so you're not totally weak all the time. And this is good, because if you're like me, you'll be dying a lot. The hitboxes here are fair and tight, but there's just so much stuff on the screen constantly, and unless you're proficient in these games, it's hard to tell what the hell is going on most of the time. You'll also have a supply of screen clearing bombs that you can use, which come in handy and are good against the bosses as well. And speaking of bosses, they are great. Much like in most Cave games, they're huge and fire ridiculous amounts of projectiles at you. Thankfully, even though you'll die a lot, you will get extra lives after certain point milestones. Though to be honest, these are kind of pointless as you actually get unlimited lives anyway. So if you want to beat the game, there's nothing stopping you. You can change this in the options I suppose if you really want a challenge. And really, that's all I really think I need to say about this one. It's a simple but fun bullet hell shooter. Honestly, for me, it doesn't seem to do anything that all the other ones in this sort of genre do, but it is still fun to play, and even though I'll never be good at them, I actually really enjoy playing through these games every now and then. So yeah, if you like this sort of nonsense, definitely give it a go. And finally for today, we have another RPG. Can you believe it? I was actually meant to include Mad Maestro, but that game requires the pressure-sensitive buttons on the PS2 controller that I can't mimic on my Steam Deck, so had to settle with this. But that's not a bad thing, as this game was really fun for me. Metal Saga is actually the 5th game in the Metal Max series that started way back on the NES, but nope, I'd never heard of it either. This game is set in a post-apocalyptic world where there's various factions all over the place that go around in a Mad Max style vehicle, collecting resources and generally trying to survive. Luckily, your group are a bunch of friendly people, and you're a hunter, someone who goes out looking for scrap and other useful things to help build better vehicles and a better way of life. And yep, it turns out there's a load of bastards not far away, and you soon get into a war with the other factions and have to fight them off. But it's not only the other factions, as there's a ton of evil sentient robots and machines all over the place that you'll also need to fight. What's cool here is that the game has a big focus on the vehicles. As you play, you'll get more and more people to join your party and have access to various different vehicles for everyone. As you'd expect, the vehicles have their own strengths and weaknesses, as do the humans that pilot them, and you can swap out vehicles and characters as you see fit, so no one character is locked to a particular vehicle, meaning you'll need to find combos that suit everyone. Vehicles can also be upgraded. You can buy new armour, weapons and special abilities for your tanks and buggies, as well as weapons and armour for your characters to use as well. So the gameplay loop here is basically what you expect from an RPG. You go around an overworld map looking for locations to explore. You'll find one, and then you'll need to explore that, looking for scrap, characters and even new vehicles to add to your army. Most of the battles are random, and they are turn-based, and I've got to say, I really enjoyed all the enemies I came across. Most are daft things like a knife on wheels, but they're fun to fight and you get a good amount of options of things to do. If you're battling with a vehicle, you can even ask drivers to get out and attack on foot. This does leave them open to take more damage, but it means you can have more turns, as you can have someone in the vehicle attacking with its weapons, while your troops on the ground attack with theirs. It's cool, and the battles never outstay their welcome. Now, as it's an RPG, I've barely scratched the surface, but I did find this one pretty addictive. I had to learn the hard way that you've got to be patient and explore the whole of your home base at the start, as I originally left it without buying any armour or weapons, and so got destroyed by the first few basic enemies. Soon I realised the error of my ways, and I went to buy some weapons and armour, and then I found my first vehicle and kitted it out with some good stuff, even managing to take out the first boss on my first try, and I really liked it. The graphics here I think are great, with a fantastic art style and some cool effects for your special attacks, and it's not too obnoxious with the amount of random battles, though you will want to spend a few hours at the start of the game getting yourself to around level 10. I would probably say that this is a good RPG for people like me who aren't really into the genre, as it's not overly complicated and the mechanics, while not completely basic, are easy to pick up and learn, and it's quite forgiving. Overall though, it's lots of fun, and I'm actually quite glad I wasn't able to play Mad Maestro properly, even though that seems like a cool game, and probably one you should also check out. But yeah, if you like turn-based RPGs, this is one you should give a go. So there you go, 10 games for the PS2 starting with the letter M that don't always get talked about. As always, don't forget to tell me how stupid I am because I didn't include the specific game that you were thinking of, but do remember to tell me what that game was, as I might get to include it in a future video. And now, all that's left for me to say is thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.